In this short video, I'm going to show you how to use the P or program mode instead of being on auto. It's kind of the first step of moving off auto, if you like, where the camera is still going to take care of things like the exposure, getting the level of brightness in the picture correct, and it's going to take care of something called aperture, which we don't need to concern ourselves with at the moment. Now, P means program mode, but perhaps that doesn't mean a lot to some people, so I prefer to think of it as posh auto, where you are a little bit more in control than if you're on auto, but the camera is, as I said, still taking care of some important stuff. Okay, so now that you've turned your dial on the top of the camera, that will be the case with most cameras anyway, turn that into P mode. There's some important differences compared to when you're in fully auto. You will find that the flash will no longer fire automatically. It won't fire at all unless you actually get it to do so by switching it on. And you will also find that you've got control over something called ISO, which I'll explain in a moment. So on my camera here, which is actually a mirrorless version, slightly different to your normal DSLR, but all of the controls and everything are very similar. So I'm just going to fire that into life by half pressing the shutter. I wouldn't normally have it on a tripod. I'm just doing that for the purposes of this training video so that I can show you things and record it at the same time. So I've got this simple setup going here with the camera focusing on those lovely tulips there, and I'm in P mode, and I just want to show you some pieces of information that you've got here on the screen. That number there is your shutter speed. This one here is the aperture, which we're going to completely ignore for the purposes of this video. We're going to completely ignore that one with the plus and minus there, but we're going to take a lot of notice of this ISO as well. So on your camera, you will find that if you've got a DSLR, when you half press the shutter button down like this, you'll find that those numbers will be shown somewhere on your screen, and they'll also be available through your viewfinder here. So take a look through the viewfinder, half press the shutter button down, and the camera focuses on the subject. So I'll just do that for you to show you. You see the beep and the green brackets come up. That means the camera's focused, but what it also does is measures the amount of light available and decides what it's going to do with these two settings here. Okay, now I've just realized I'm not in P mode, so I'm just going to do that. Okay, so I'm in P mode now, and these settings have changed very slightly. Okay, the shutter speed there has changed, this F number, the aperture has changed a little bit, but the ISO's the same because that's what I set it to. Now, when you're hand holding your camera, it's really important that your shutter speed is at least 1/60th of a second, which it is there. You can see it's 1/60th of a second. It won't necessarily be 1/60th of a second on your cameras. You might find it's higher or lower. So if it was a lower, slower shutter speed, it might be 1/10. And if it's faster because it's brighter, it might be 1/100 or even higher. Okay, so I've just said to you that we definitely need a shutter speed of 1/60 when we're photographing, because that'll stop us having camera shake. I'll just wake the camera back into life there. If yours does the same, you can just half press the shutter button and it brings it back off standby. Okay, so my shutter speed happens to be 1/60 at the moment, but that's a happy accident. So that's great, but what if it wasn't? What if your shutter speed is currently saying 1/10 or slower? Then there's something that you can do to make this shutter speed faster, okay? And that thing is this magic thing here called ISO. Now, I'm not going to explain to you particularly what ISO is. I'm just going to tell you what it does. So somewhere on your camera you'll find a button that says ISO, like this one here. It might be on your dial here. It might also be a button that you have to hold down somewhere on the top of your camera there. Okay, but I'm going to just press that button and you can see that mine's on 400 at the moment, the number's 400, and I can go lower. I can go all the way down to 64 on mine. That might not be the case with yours, you'll have to have a look. Or I can go all the way up. My camera goes very high, yours may not go as high as this. I can go all the way up to 25,600. Okay, so let me put that on 25,600 for you. No, actually I won't go that high. Let me put it on 2,000. Remember it was on 400 when I first started. It's now on 2,000. So I'm pressing the center to set. Okay, can you see that my shutter speed is now a lot faster? That number is higher. That's 1/125, 1/125th of a second. So that's faster. And all I did to change that is then make that number higher, make the ISO higher. Okay, so let's see what happens if I make my ISO number really low. Okay, I'll make it 80 and press set. You see now that my shutter speed is 1/30, which isn't fast enough for me to hold the camera steady. Okay, imagine this isn't on a tripod, it's in my hands. 1/30 is now too slow a shutter speed for me to hold steadily in my hands. And what could happen is I could get camera shake when I'm taking a picture. In fact, can you see that symbol there? That's the camera warning me that I could get camera shake. Now if I put my ISO back up to a higher number, we had it on 400 before, didn't we, to get 60 as the shutter speed. Okay, now the handshake symbol's gone and I've got a shutter speed of 1/60. Okay, now I'm going to stop this part of the lesson there so that each video isn't too long, but what you just learnt there is that to photograph something when you hand hold the camera, your shutter speed needs to be at least 1/60. If it isn't, you need to change your ISO. Make it higher and this number will go higher. Make it lower and this number will go slower. It'll drop, the shutter speed will become slower. Okay? Now, in the next lesson, I'm going to talk to you about what the shutter speed needs to be for something that isn't stationary or inanimate, like these tulips. What happens if you were to be photographing a dog running, for example, because your shutter speed would have to be very different. So that's the end of this lesson. Go off and have a practice of photographing things around your home or out in the garden, making sure that you've got a shutter speed of at least 60. Now, a quick mention that what you will find when you're outside is that, especially because it's a very bright sunny day where I am at the moment, what you will find is that this number will be much higher even when this number, the ISO, is very low. And that's because it's much brighter outside than it is inside. Okay, so the brighter it is, the faster your shutter speed will be. Okay? The duller it is, the slower your shutter speed is. Okay, so you will find outside that you could have this number very low, at its lowest perhaps on 100 on your camera, and this will still be very fast because it's so bright outside. Okay, so for now, go off and have a practice of that and see how you get on. And if you're finding that you're not really understanding that very well, then give me a shout, probably via your parents on Facebook for the moment. Okay, thank you.